good morning, and thank you so much for joining us with episode 3 of the Best of Community. I'm here today with Jaime-Lee Gardner and Jeff Gilmour. Jaime-Lee is my business partner from Estate Living, as you all know, and Jeff Gilmour is the president of ARC. Today we're unpacking a very important subject. That's around the brand of the estate, the perception of the homeowners living within that community, and of course how that relates at the end of the day to your property value and the opportunities around selling or reselling your properties. Maybe Jamie, you'd like to introduce yourself, and then Jeff, and then we can get the conversation going.
Hello everybody, my name is Jaime-Lee Gardner and I'm the founder and CEO of Estate Living. So fundamentally, our business is a specialist communication agency that focuses on communication, branding and marketing, and of course community sentiment as a whole.
Cool. Good to be with you ladies again. My name is Jeff, and as Lou said earlier on, I work for the Association of Residential Communities, and we've been business partners with Estate Living for many a year. I always say that we lack in the areas of storytelling and beautification and bringing fact into people's homes and people's lives, and that's what you ladies do so well. So whatever we come up with, whatever our member communities talk about, Lou and Jamie turn them into wonderful stories. So, and I love the topic for today, Lou. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So it's good to be here.
Great. So I tell you what, let's start with giving folks an overview of when we talk about the brand, what it is that we're talking about specifically. And I think before we started this webinar, Jeff, you mentioned something very, very important about the kinds of issues that homeowners association management teams grapple with when it comes to the brand. And maybe you could just give us an understanding of what those issues are, and then we can come in and assist you with solutions.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. You know, perceptions are real. And we often find that we'll have directors of a homeowners association when faced with the issue of whether they are a brand or whether they're not a brand per se, and they would have issues around whether the homeowners association is simply a fourth level of government, they're simply a delivery of service, and leave the brand to the golf club or to the hotel or to the spa that's on site. So that's one issue that we need to deal with and get the message into the boardrooms that the HOA has a pivotal role. And I know Jamie's going to cover that a little bit later in this video. We have a pivotal role in making sure that the brand of our communities is strong within the walls and outside the walls. The other situation is that, and this is not really an issue, this is a reality, in that some estates have ownership of the entire estate under the auspices of the homeowners association. And while that wasn't common in the past, it's become more common now, where the developers are willing to sell it or give it away or sell it at a premium price to the homeowners association. So in that case, an HOA, through its various committees, will have a closer contact or closer concern with the brand of the estate as a whole, because they're the ones that own it, you know, within various structures. But then there are communities that don't. And we know the situation between developers and owners. It very often turns sour because homeowners don't understand the role of developers in the main. And often you will find that there is conflict amongst the two where they then turn around and say, well, the developer must worry about his brand. He's just here to sell houses and make as much money as he can. And the HOA here is to set rules and make everybody comply. Now, we know that that's not true. The synergy between developers, hotel owners, club owners, whoever they may be, wine farm owners, and the homeowners association has to be one. And I'm hoping that going forward, our communities and our directors and trustees will place a higher emphasis on the fact that it is a brand. And I'm hoping that we'll also discuss the relevance, Lou, on the brand and the perception of the brand to property value. And I know you're going to talk about that in a minute.
And just further to that, before Jamie jumps in here, and something to consider is the future of community living. So if we look at where communities are and what you said about the fourth tier of government or mini municipalities, the role that they're playing within the infrastructure of the community. But further to that, estates are looking at how they themselves can start to drive revenue around certain facilities. It's becoming more and more important as the costs to run those facilities, obviously increase, and the quantity or the number of homeowners that are living in that estate can't necessarily support that facility, such as a restaurant, etc. So what role does the brand play in the securing the future of those facilities from a longer term? And I think that's something we should think of as more and more new developments coming into the market have got strategies around, revenue driving facilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in a communication role, specifically on a daily basis myself, communication, marketing, branding role, it's been a very interesting time, like walking the streets in our masks, during our allocated times. And I recognize that in a time where the world is being concealed behind our masks, can we truly afford for our businesses, our brand, our estate, our development to be concealed at this time? I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about not being out there and communicating what we're about. We are we're in a world that is rapidly changing. The economy is taking strain. Businesses are closing down. Contracts are being cut, and in many instances, levies aren't being paid. And I think, all of this has got a very direct effect. There's been a very direct effect on community sentiment within these environments as well. So I do believe that now more than ever, communication and driving your community's brand and value, your value proposition, is more important than ever. To hold community sentiment as positive, but also for future growth and future opportunities for your particular development as well. So this is what. So my point being is, in a time where we're all looking, everyone is, the first thing that you cut when you're looking at trimming the fat. Whilst some of us are getting fat at home in the process, staying home. But as you look at cutting your budgets around communication, marketing, and branding, and people don't see the value around this. But this, in actual fact, should be what is driving our processes, because in this instance, we have it's very easy for us to determine what communication and what community sentiment can be as well through our communication, especially if it's digital. Because communication and data is the new currency.
If we go back a step and we look at the purchasing journey that a resident takes, so let's look at an established estate. For the individual who's bought into that estate, in whichever timeline they're in, the reason why they found out information about the estate was perhaps in those days they read it in the newspaper, or they saw it on Property 24, or they heard about it through a friend or family, and they bought into that community with a very perceived idea of what that community is going to have for them. That the lifestyle of the community, the age groups of the residents, and the facilities available was going to suit their lifestyle and their family setup. So already the journey around the brand had started for that particular homeowner. So as residents and trustees and anyone living within a community, they have all bought into a specific brand perception. So originally, when you have a new development coming into the market, the property developer spends an enormous amount of money promoting that development, like they really do. So there's an enormous amount of communication that goes out. From the time that the people start moving into the community and the property developer exits that particular community, so does the money that is used to create brand awareness and the value around that property. So what happens at that point? How do you maintain the property prices and the lifestyle offering and that perception that the outside community has got and the reasons why they buy into that community?
So firstly, if I can respond, the directors and the trustees have to ensure that there is sustainability and transitioning from a developer-controlled community, because the developer has generally spent large sums of money on advertising and promotions and brand building and positioning and pricing strategies and distribution strategies. Now the developer leaves, and some boards of directors believe, well, now the whole estate is full. We do not have any concern going forward because, thank you, developer, you've done the marketing for us. Now, I don't believe that's true. I believe that there is huge onus on the directors and the trustees to assume some form of responsibility for maintaining that brand. Now, it requires money, and I believe that boards of trustees should be budgeting for that, because value is a perception that people see. And the states with this COVID-19 that are in the news all the time with negative stuff. They're doing this, they're doing that, people are moaning. We see it on YouTube, and then it's Facebook, and it's that's the brand. There are other communities that, you said it, Jamie, non-conspicuous, or what word did you use? It was kind of below the radar, but maintaining the. That's it, which was powerful. So I'm not suggesting they must be conspicuous, because branding is about positioning your brand in the market, but it's also about positioning and sustaining the brand inside your estate, which has a direct impact of value. So I ran a session with a board of directors a while back in Joburg, and they were talking about putting a plan in place to ensure that the involvement of the developer is maintained, not as ownership, not with veto powers, not with any restrictive powers, not in a controlled environment, but from an accessibility environment, because he or she has lived that brand in their efforts to sell property. Now what we need to do is to ensure that we can still tap into a resource, might not be the developer, him or herself, but a resource that allows us to continue to enhance and sustain that brand, because it does have an impact on the value of property.
If I can jump in quickly, Jeff, and you're so right. And a brand today is you're not necessarily selling anything. A brand today is about authenticity. It's about integrity. It's about credibility and the relevance of an environment. And ultimately, it's about community. If we think about our environment, it's about community and wanting to belong within this space. And when you belong, you have there's a sense of pride. So immediately your sense of community and just the challenges that we face, are almost quelled, because you want to live in harmony with your neighbor, and you have a sentiment about this. So it's not about selling anything today. It's about keeping up that perception of what the real value is, the original reason why you moved into that place, into that space in the first place. So, and that's what your communication should be about. It doesn't have to be a big marketing stories, but mountain vistas and all of these things. It's about your community. It's about your neighbors. It's about the kids being able to play outside. It's about the clubhouse and the fun and the joys that you can all have together and living together. Because nowadays we want to love where we live. That's what COVID has done for us. It's about, we will all now chase the lifestyle that we want to live for the rest of our lives. And that's one thing that I think that we could be grateful for, is this quickening towards all of us going, sure, but what if we die tomorrow? Am I in the space where I truly want to be? And I think that's what having your brand for your community is about. It's about sentiment and attracting people who want to belong to your community long term.
Wow, we're even getting excited about moving to level 4 down to 3, and we're kind of saying, well, now we can do this and now we can do that kind of thing. So if nothing else, it's a newness, and maybe that newness is teaching us new things. But I'm so glad you brought it back inside. It's playing, it's living, it's working, it's children, it's youth, it's all of these good things. It's not about billboards outside trying to sell, because there an HOA has a right to say, why should we put up billboards on the value of property? It's an estate agent's job. You're not talking about that, as you quite correctly said, Jamie. It's the spirit, isn't it?
I think I want to interject there, because there are two very separate audiences that we're talking about at the moment. We've got what people perceive that particular brand represents and how that affects the property value and the value of that assets overall. So if I'm buying into a community, what am I prepared to pay? And when I research that particular development, what does that development offer me, and how does that look in comparison to a neighboring development? So there's a rand value there. So I do believe that there is an importance on communicating asset value outside of the community as whole. What you're talking about as well is the sentiment within the community. And there we ask ourselves, whose responsibility is it? And I think this goes back to one of our earlier questions, is what the HOA grapples with. Is it the HOA's responsibility to build brand perception amongst its homeowners and residents? Or is it the HOA's responsibility to manage the assets? Because that's what an HOA is. And there are asset managers. They manage the assets of those estates. So when you start looking at brand and consumer sentiment, you're moving across from an actual asset, but you're moving into the kind of slightly more emotional side to living in that particular property. There isn't a maintenance regime and anything that goes with the number of Easter egg hunts you're going to have so that the kids are happy. How many Easter eggs do you hide to make sure everybody gets one? And those are the types of small actions that lead to homeowner sentiment. And there again, what I personally find is that you can't create a them and us attitude. Yeah. If your community consists of a number of assets, a hotel, a vineyard, a restaurant, a golf course, a residential node, a retirement village, a lock-up and go facility, horse tracks or whatever it might be. Each one of those facilities are interconnected through the ethos of that particular development, the brand of that particular development. And the responsibility lies that collectively we all adhere to that brand sentiment. So it's almost like when you join your community, or when your board is sitting around, do you have a clearly defined objective for your particular development? And how does that objective interact with the other departments? And how does that objective ultimately improve the value of the asset as a collective? And I think it becomes like, and I can imagine, you've moved into an estate, you've bought into something, you love it, but do you really want to be bothered with or do you really think about the value of the assets until you want to resell the property?
Exactly. So the value therefore lies in your experience right the way up until when you do sell your property. So I think both is intertwined. So community sentiment as well as community's brand value, I believe, are one and the same thing. But buying into estates, as we know, Lou, we've had this personal experience way back when we started estate living. Buying into a estate without recognizing that the kids aren't allowed on the golf course, can't take the dogs for a walk or whatever it might be. You want to make sure you're buying into the right community. And that's why I believe that the authenticity and the communication of the authenticity and community value is very important, not just inside of your estate or inside of your development, but outside as an external communication as well. It's not about the mountain vistas and all of those good things, but it's about what real life is about within that environment.
Real life. Yeah.
So Jamie, in your experience working in the space, would you say that it's real life that people are buying into when they buy into a community, or are they buying into a perceived perception? Because I can understand. Sorry?
Yeah, I think they're buying into the perception. They're definitely buying into the perception. But why can that not be the real life? Look, I think every community, whether you're living in an estate or not, comes with its challenges. We all know, especially during COVID and lockdown now, the types of interactions we've had with our neighbors. It doesn't matter whether you're living in an estate or not, you're still going to have those types of interactions with your neighbors. Yeah. So I think the perception can be the reality, and that's why it's very important to share community value and community sentiment, both internally as well as externally.
And I think, sorry.
I was just going to say, people's perception is their reality. And one needs to find out through surveys and research and development what would we like the people coming into this estate and being really happy and community driven in the state. What would we like their perception of estate A or estate B to be? And that's where the importance of upholding this brand is so important, because we would want people to have good experiences, even though living in any form of compliance, controlled environment or governed environment has its issues and challenges, as we discussed in the last video that we did last week, Lou. Yeah. So it's it's hard work. If I were an estate agent and I took someone to a community, I would meet them at the clubhouse. I would then walk them through the community center and through the creche and through the whatever the case may be. And the last place I'd take them to is the home that is on show for today. Because if you take them to the home as the point of departure, as an example, their vision of what they're buying into is the pub and the swimming pool and their view. Their vision of what they're buying into, we believe, to make happy, harmonious people that love their neighbors, is what access they're getting to lifestyle. It's the American model. And that's really important. And HOAs have to be concerned with the happiness and the harmony of the people inside the community and the proper investment value of their properties at the same time.
I think you've said something very important there, and it's something we noted throughout the journey that somebody would take through a community. So from an everyday basis to even an estate agent taking a potential buyer around, this is always a third party. You have service providers providing the security at the main gate, a separate service providing company doing the landscaping. This is an outside party who's the estate agent that's welcoming the estate. How would a residential community uphold their brand if most of their ambassadors to that estate are third party service providers?
Yeah. Just adds to the complexity of it, doesn't it, Jamie?
So, maybe Jamie, what role does a service provider play in the overall brand?
I think your service provider becomes a part of your family. It becomes a part of the community there, and I think it's very important that on appointment of that service provider, they are sat down and you go through the community values, the values of that community sentiment, and naturally a bit of training. Look, as we know, many of the security service providers now do go through like a hospitality type training as well, just because of the movement of the industry too. But I think service providers 100% play a very large role of that community. So it's important to have that discussion with them at the offset on, what that community sentiment is as well. But naturally also to appoint the right type of service provider that is providing integrated services, that is relevant to the environment, with the credibility, the case studies behind their name, that where you can see that your offerings and your values are aligned. And I think that's very important too.
So let's get down to some ideas and tips and stuff that perhaps COVID's not going to be here forever, and lockdown's not going to be here forever. There are many doom and gloom people that believe that our whole world has changed. I think certain components of it will, and certain operational activities will, but we will get over this. We will get out of this lockdown, and we'll get back to doing the normal things like having meetings and dinners and all of these good things. It may change the numbers that we do and how often we do them and all of that yet, and whether we wear a mask or not, that may change. But, boards are going to have to get back to normal quite soon. There's a whole operation to run there. There's a whole brand to build out there, or rather, a whole brand to sustain out there. So, where do we go from here in terms of maybe one or two or three tips or ideas?
Yeah, I would say, look, if you just look at the basics, so where do you start? I would say start with a professional. Start with a community living specialist that can help you sit down and just establish your objectives and your goals and what the essence of your community is, the sentiment. Then you need to create content. Content can be feel good. It needs to speak to the needs. It needs to build community sentiment. It needs to build pride. And definitely digital is the way to go. Just with if you look at just the increase in digital communications and opportunities over the last while has been phenomenal. Little educational webinars have also been fantastic. But social media, community mailers, community apps, these already allow you the space and an immediate integration into community, which drives peer-to-peer sentiment. So I think that's very important. And the wonderful thing as well is that anybody can create content today. Just look at what's happening on TikTok at the moment. I don't know not that everybody should be creating content, but everybody can create content.
Just took my entire career and blew it up there. Anybody can do this. This is so easy. Yes.
No,
Everybody,
what I'm saying,
everyone,
do it, but you do it with a professional, you know.
Thanks.
everyone can, but you need to
Go
balance.
home. Well, I am home.
You need to take content and contextualize it to your point of departure and your goal. So everyone can create content. Facebook creates content. Would I take people's posts on Facebook and publish them anywhere else relevant to a homeowners association? No. I could take it, however, and turn it into a wonderful, powerful story, message, an inspiring story and message if I understand the context of a homeowners association. And that's what organizations like Estate Living and ARC do. That's our bread and butter, you know. So that's an
professional.
Important point.
It's about doing it with a professional.
Yeah.
My point is that you are already the expert within your specific environment, whether you are the estate, a developer, a service provider, any professional working within this environment. Work with the communication specialist to help you identify and plot, plan, and execute your communication strategy with the professionals. Content, digital content also provides a wonderful opportunity for regular and dynamic use of the content as well. I think regular, consistent communication is also very, very important. We're a firm believer in video content. This is just at the moment, people are busy and you want to be able to quickly watch something that's interesting and walk away from that interaction having learned something and having had an interesting experience through that. So we just absolutely love video content. As we know, YouTube's got the highest following of content in the world, but you can tie video content into your own website, into affiliate websites such as Estate Livings or working with ARC, into your profiles and that. And this is a phenomenal way of driving that authenticity of your community, your brand, or your professional services.
And I think also by regularly, and regular being the operative word, by regularly sharing positive affirmations and news around your estate, the negative news cycle gets squashed. You've got, and people aren't always going to like what you say. It is impossible to keep everybody happy. We all do our best, but the more positive affirmations, good pieces, what's happening, and be real, be honest, be authentic, but keep it consistent, because that naysayer will disappear somewhere down a feed and never to be seen again, or whatever. So I wouldn't, that's important. But if you're sending out a post every now and again and it doesn't really relate to anything and it's just between meetings, you're like, oh damn, I haven't done my social, that's not a strategy. That's definitely not a strategy. And getting your daughter to do it for you is also not a strategy. I know, I've tried. It's not a strategy, even though everyone can do content.
And you will see that people are more likely to participate in your positive communication than what they want to participate in your negative communication.
All right, so that's been fantastic. Why don't we ask Lou to wrap it up for us, and I don't know if you want to talk about the next topic. Maybe not. I don't know. Please don't put me on the spot and say, what are we talking about next? Because I don't know.
So I do think it is important to us to look at the next topic. Absolutely. We've discussed harmony and levies. We've discussed rules. We've looked at the brand. I think, we've touched on something here that's quite interesting. It's how do we, as community living environments, engage with our service providers to create, to take that messaging forward. And I think there's something interesting here. You know, like any industry, you always have your sort of top 5 stars. But as you've noticed with COVID, there are more and more businesses coming into the market. So, you know, the fiber networks are seeing an increase in numbers of businesses, and a whole bunch of other parts of the industry, landscaping. You know, how do you go about making the right choice for your development and sharing your experiences with particular service providers, and how can we grow as an industry to do that? And I think that might be quite an interesting topic.
Great idea. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
All right then. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And you know, today we've touched on the content, the topic of brand and consumer sentiment, and I know what a challenge it is amongst community management to find something for the youth market to do, you know, and to find something for the kiddies and to keep your homeowners. And I think, just on a positive note, what we found during this COVID lockdown, level 5 and level 4, that homeowners have engaged with each other. And there's been some wonderful, you know, feel good community you know, community programs that have come out of into the estates. There's a soup and a meal thing that's been happening at Danefern. There's yoga instructors that are bending always and everywhere online every morning. I mean, I think the homeowners and residents are not only going to be flexible, but are going to be extremely flexible by the end of the lockdown. So to all of those who've taken the initiative to start something and to keep those relationships going, even though we're not connected, that just takes everything that we are saying here and just proves that about living in a community is a really special thing. And yeah, so thank you to all of those people, and we look forward to seeing each other on the next episode, where we look at our service providers and how we can improve.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,